I almost don't want to stop playing that. It's been, I imagine for a lot of people, it's been a little stressful recently, so it's nice to hear some music like that. Well, hello everyone. Oh, there you are up on that camera. It is the very end of March 2020, and what a time it is. And the year seems to be going very quickly as well. I was on a call with Nikki and Dave this morning, and we remarked how quickly this year has gone by. So, in today's live stream, we're actually going to be joined by master musician Jeff Peterson. Now, Jeff Peterson is a phenomenal slack key guitarist, ukulele player, and he has played with the likes. He just played with someone pretty amazing, actually. I'll let him tell you that story, but he's played with Tommy Emmanuel, Jake Shimabuko. Um, I'll have to get him to give you the list because it's quite an amazing list of collaborators that he's worked with, but he's a phenomenal musician. And we have just collaborated recently on a book and a website project, actually. So the book is this graded repertoire for ukulele, and it's classical. And we also have gone in together to create an online education site called Ukulele Corner. And so I thought it'd be a really nice opportunity to bring Jeff in on one of these live streams, and he's going to show us all about how he's taken a lot of this classical guitar repertoire and put it onto the ukulele. It's quite amazing how he's done some of this. I mean, when we were discussing repertoire and he talked to things about Capricho Árabe by Francisco Tarrega, Mysterious Barricades, Bach cello suites, Bach gavottes. We were just listening to an arioso just then. It's pretty amazing what you can do, what you can take onto the ukulele, and it's such a beautiful sounding instrument. So I'm really looking forward to introducing you to him and hearing what he has to say. But before we get into that, please do say hello. I see Spiller has already said hello from Charleston, South Carolina. Great to have you with us, Spiller. Spiller's actually, you've joined quite a few live streams, so thank you very much for that. Thank you for joining in. But please do say hello and where you're tuning in from. What's been going on at Classical Guitar Corner? We've had, as you probably know, quite a lot of live streams, and we put out a list of things that are coming up this week. We've got obviously this live stream right now. We have another scale workshop on Thursday at 4 o'clock. And then we'll be doing our performance seminar inside the Academy for members, and of course exams. Exams go out tomorrow, so we just hit the ton with exams. We have 100 exams that were submitted, over 100 this time. So we'll be getting a lot of those out tomorrow, and of course about a third of those exams came in the last 24 hours. So we will do our best to get those out in a timely fashion too. But it's been really wonderful having Dave and Nikki and James also helping us with the exams this time. So we've managed to have it out nice and quickly. So how about before I call Jeff, let's see if I can play you a video. I'm just closing up some things here. Let me see. I have to find it first. Too many things open. Here we go. So today is Bach's birthday. So let's play this video we just put out. This is the Bach Gavotte #1 from the 6 cello suite, performed by Jeff on the ukulele. Let me just get the necessary things lined up, and we'll have a listen, and then we'll go and call Jeff. Let me see if this works. oops, I had muted myself. So the wonderful playing there and wonderful music. That's of course Johann Sebastian Bach, his cello suite, and really wonderful to hear on the ukulele. So, hi Steph, hi Steve, Greg, Cipriano. Really lovely of you to join us. How about we give Jeff a call? Let's give him a call. So here we go.
Hey, aloha.
Hi Jeff. How are you?
Good. How's it going?
Everything's good. We've got a lot of people joining us here on YouTube and saying hi. And Spilla is here. Spilla Williams and Greg Pace said that your book is outstanding. And
Oh, great. I
Steph
appreciate
said
it.
this
Thank
is
you.
some people, certain admirers, already saying hello. So,
Nice.
well, we just listened to you play the Gavotte from the Six Cello Suite. I just put that video out onto the Ukulele Corner channel. So it's
Oh,
Bach's birthday
nice.
today.
Yeah, that's right. That's amazing.
So it'd be a nice. It seems like an appropriate time. So I'd like to start because I think some people might not know your backstory and your background. So
Sure.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your musical background, and also please feel free to name drop some of the amazing collaborations you've done in the past because it is pretty outstanding. So tell us about your musical background.
Yeah, so I'm here now in Kailua on the island of Oahu, on the windward side of Oahu. I grew up on the island of Maui in a little town called Makawao, which is up in the hills. There's a town called Olinda above there. And my father was a rancher on Haleakala Ranch. He grew up on Oahu. My Hawaiian side of my family went back many, many generations in Manoa Valley, which is where the main university is in Hawaii. He grew up there, and actually my mom did too. They didn't know each other as kids, but they're in the same valley on this island. But anyway, he moved to the Big Island and studied ranching. He was the first person in the family to leave, Oahu and venture off and do something like this. And so he studied with these old-time Paniolo, or Hawaiian cowboys, up at Kahua Ranch in the Kohala Mountains of Hawaii Island. From there, he moved to Ulupalakua and the ranch there in upcountry Maui, and then moved over to Haleakala Ranch, where I was born and raised. So a really beautiful place to grow up, and music was definitely a big part of the culture, of the cowboy Paniolo culture. A lot of his friends would play music, and we'd spend a lot of time just exploring the mountain and going on these fishing trips. There'd always be a guitar packed, even on a horse without a case. I remember that, like, how did we do that? And he would sometimes, it should have had steel strings, but he replaced on a steel string guitar with nylon strings, and he was able to figure out how to take the suji, or fishing line, and tie it onto the guitar. So it had about as much sustain as a tennis racket. But it worked fine for, strumming and playing songs. So I grew up listening to live music with my dad and his friends, and so I couldn't wait to start playing music. I picked up the ukulele, and then probably when I was about 8 or 9, I picked up the guitar. And then I became interested in all different types of music, from, like what most kids my age were listening to, all the rock guitar players and everything. Then I started getting into classical music, and I remember my grandparents had a collection of Segovia. It must have been one of those, maybe, I wouldn't say Reader's Digest, but something like that, where they put together an album collection. So they had about 30 cassette tapes of all of Segovia's work. And that was such a revelation to be able to dive into that, and it really opened my ears up. Then I started listening to many of the great classical guitarists and jazz guitar players. And so all through high school, I learned mainly on my own and through, just books and other resources. Then I went to study at USC, University of Southern California, and I was in the jazz program there. But there also were, Scott Tennant, Bill Canengeiser were there. They had studied with Pepe Romero. And a classmate of Scott Tennant and Bill Canengeiser was Lisa Smith. And not many people know about her, but she was a phenomenal guitar player who studied that same period with Pepe Romero at USC and also in San Diego. And then she came back to Hawaii and started teaching here. So I was fortunate to then finally find a really great teacher of classical guitar in Hawaii. So I spent a lot of time with her. Then at USC, I studied, like as I mentioned, I got into jazz, and I was in what they call the studio guitar program. So making sure if you go into recording studio, whatever type of music might be needed for a session. I thought it was really fun. I had a class on Delta blues and a class on pop guitar and all these different styles. And so because of all that, my background is pretty broad, where I find that all music starts to just intersect in this beautiful way. And so I play a lot of Hawaiian slack key, which is the Paniolo music that I grew up listening to. But I try to bring in influences from classical music and jazz and other things.
And you've been modest. I want you. I'm now asking you to name drop some of the amazing musicians that you've collaborated with.
I do a lot of collaborating. We have a very dear mutual friend, Ben Verdery, and Ben he's taught a class on Maui for years. And I remember when I was even back in high school, I heard of this amazing guitar player who came and he was like dancing on tables up at this private school called Seabury Hall. And he blew everybody away there, and like, who is this guy? And he had everybody not only totally inspired to play music, but just, inspired about life in general. He came to my high school and did a performance, but I didn't even hear about it. I didn't know, I missed it. And so years later, I finally got to know Ben, and he's been a dear friend and great influence. I've played with a lot of the musicians in Hawaii who are popular. From Keola Beamer, he's one of my main mentors, and he's like family to me. He is a real wonderful, one of the great resources of Hawaiian slack key guitar. Cyril Pahinui, Dennis Kamakahi, Amy Hanai Li'i is a singer who I tour all over the world with, Nathan Avial. But a few interesting collaborations I had. I got to work with Eric Clapton once. I was going to school at USC, and randomly, back when there were actually answering machines, I checked my messages after coming back from classes one day, and there's a call from a casting studio. And I thought it was just to play music for, a soundtrack or for a commercial, just to record and do a studio session. I was just starting to do that. I have no idea how they got my number. I think they basically were just calling around music schools trying to find students who might be interested. So I convinced a friend of mine. I didn't have a car in LA, and LA is not the kind of town where you can just hop on a bus and get where you need to be easily. So I talked a friend into cutting class, and I took my guitar and we went down to Melrose Avenue, and there was this big, huge studio lot. And as soon as we got in there, I thought, wow, this is definitely not a music studio. What am I getting into? And I found where there was a line. I introduced who I was. They had a reservation for me, and there were about 200 people with portfolios and agents and little kids with their moms, all actors. And I'm standing there with a guitar, and I waited for hours and went through this long staircase going up to this room. Finally got up in there, and there was a little guitar amp, and they asked me to plug in and play some blues. And so before I even said anything, I just sat down and started playing blues. And then they only asked me a few questions. They asked me, what interests me in music, and have I ever heard of this musician named Eric Clapton? How ridiculous, right? So anyway, it was a Japanese company. There was this panel of Japanese producers and businessmen there, and all these cameras. And I left there thinking, what a waste of time. Why did I even go there? They're looking for an actor. But a couple days later, I got a call. They hired me for a part to be in a TV commercial for Japan. And so in the commercial, I got to play and hang out and spend a whole day with Eric Clapton playing music. And we had so much fun. He was so nice. He couldn't stand the fact that he had to be there to do this commercial, but he loved just talking with me and playing. We got to just sit in the trailer and play all day. It was really fantastic.
Oh, wow. That's a great story. Wow. And, we're sort of fast forwarding. You were just on a very extensive US tour through March that was just cut short. Of course, there's a lot of shenanigans, shall we say, going on. So it's unfortunate, but you said you got to play with another sort of musical great just before that got cut short.
Yeah, well, being here in Hawaii, it's surprising who will just show up, and a lot of people move here, of course, to get away from big cities and to unwind. And so on Maui, of course, it's famous for Willie Nelson being there. There was this beautiful, beautiful home that I saw once kayaking from the ocean down the coastline of Hana, which is one of the most remote places in the world, really. In the middle of a rainforest, looking up these rocky cliffs, there's this big mansion there, and it belonged to George Harrison. So that was his refuge from the world. He would get out to the edge of Hana on Maui. But another person who moved to Maui recently, and he's been doing amazing things to connect with the community, is Paul Simon. And he purchased a home in the Wailea area, really amazing part of the island of Maui, beautiful area, and a place where Ben actually does his class, or I used to do his class there often. There's a beautiful church out there. And so Paul Simon called Keola Beamer, just out of the blue. Keola Beamer was hanging out one day, and he gets this call, and thought it was a prank or something. Oh no, this is Paul Simon. I'm a big fan of your music, and I'd love to get together. We should have dinner sometime. So Keola invited Paul Simon over. He came over to the house, and they had dinner. Paul did a fundraising concert that was tremendously successful for the native Hawaiian rainforest and watershed. 2 sold-out nights at the Arts and Cultural Center. It made something like $500,000 for this beautiful fund. And he's really been reaching out to the community. So recently, right before going on this tour, I was on Kauai at Keola Beamer's annual music camp. It's called the Aloha Music Camp. I was teaching there. And Keola just told me on the side, don't tell anyone, but we got a special guest coming in. And that's all they put on a door for the students. Special guests today. They didn't want to, to blow up. And, there was about maybe 150 or so students at this camp. And so Paul Simon came, and he actually taught a songwriting and a guitar playing class, which I thought was really cool. He talked about Travis picking and, some of his chord voicing ideas. And it was really inspiring just sitting there, with such an icon. And he was so gracious and sharing. And then he asked me to play with him at the end. We played the Boxer together, and it was really fun.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, I'm just nerding out, living vicariously through you. That's such a great story. Amazing questions. Well, we better zoom forward to ukulele and classical music on the ukulele. Tell us about, show us your instrument first. Tell us about
Sure.
what kind of world we're talking about here.
Yeah, so I have this is a koa ukulele, and I have actually this little contraption that I made. I had a friend of mine, and I invented, if you've ever seen a guitar support, I wanted to have one for ukulele because traditionally you play the instrument, I'll take this off, by sort of resting your arm, and there's a tendency to have your fingers hold here and use your thumb and index finger. You kind of grip on with your pinky, or you just really hunker down with your arm and try to hold it there. The other option, of course, is you can put a strap on the instrument. But this is a low G tenor ukulele. A high G would work fine too, but for the book that we just worked on, I decided to use low G. So it is like the top 4 strings of a guitar, but it's up, if you imagine capoing the 5th fret. So it's G, C, E, A. So it's up a 4th. But this is Ko Aloha is the brand of ukulele that I play. They're really supportive, beautiful people that work at this company, and they do a lot of community outreach and things. And they have a very typical headstock that looks like a crown. And it's all koa wood, so that's where the Ko Aloha comes from. You can kind of see the beautiful patterns in the back.
Yeah, very nice.
Yeah. So as I was mentioning before, it's the way I'm sitting, it's a little hard to see, but I rest the instrument, the lower bout, on my right leg and kind of prop it up here. And this is possible to do that. I find with a footstool and sort of tilting the instrument back, then you can get a little bit more of that right-hand classical position that guitar players love to use, where you have then use of thumb, index, middle ring without any sort of limitations of how your hands are. There's another tendency when the guitar or ukulele is not supported for it to fall. So your left hand loses a bit of freedom because you're often touching right where the neck is onto the hand. Mm-hmm. So having some sort of support, whether it's a high footstool, a strap, or this little contraption that I came up with, it's just like the A-frame guitar support, that allows us to have the sort of the freedom of motion that you'd have when playing guitar with a similar sort of support.
Is that so? Did you build that yourself?
Yeah,
is that cool? Duct tape?
It's duct tape. This is a prototype. A friend of mine has. He's a dear friend. He's a little bit crazy. He lives up in the Seattle area. He has a 3D printer.
Oh, cool.
And so he came over. He was visiting. He came to a concert I did. We had lunch together. I brought the support that I have, and he'd mapped it out. He just went to a hardware store, just got wire. He digitally printed certain parts that hold it together. And then, yeah, for now, duct tape, but this could be, material of some kind. But look at the difference. Then you put your hands free because you have the instrument down. Now my left hand has no problem moving. My right hand can bring out all the tonal colors without being locked in right here. So that was my idea for wanting to come up with this little contraption. But if you watch, there's so many great ukulele players who do wonderful things without it. So it's not crucial to have, but I find that it definitely takes a little bit of the strain off of your shoulders and your hands, and is very helpful to relax when you play. So
could you demonstrate some of sort of the classical approach that you are now using on the ukulele, and maybe talk about some of the differences? You already talked about how, holding positions. We almost, I guess, talked about the sitting position, but could you talk a bit about the left and right hand positions?
Sure, yeah. So with this, as I mentioned, a traditional way of playing ukulele is using, really the index finger often is playing on its side like this, and the thumb is behind the index finger. But that's really great for strumming. If you're playing Hawaiian music and other types of music, right? And that strumming pattern and position then can easily go into finger picking, so you can be strumming and finger picking together. But having studied classical guitar, I love using, I have a ramp shape on my nails so that I can get a little bit of the fingertip with the nail in there. You can get this bright sound or warm sound by how the nail is turned. And so really it's identical to how I would think of using my right hand setup to get more of the classical technique, where the thumb is out in front of the index finger. There's a C shape with the fingers. There's a little bit of a tilt here. And another thing I noticed before I was using this contraption, I was tilting a lot to try to anchor the instrument in. So if you see how much tilt, that's a crazy amount of tilt, and it puts a strain on the fingers. So now I can have the position about here, which is similar to how, playing guitar, you don't want to be too low or too high. Just a little bit of a tilt is helpful so that you can move from the back knuckle with follow through towards the back of the hand. And also another thing I try to think of is being in front of the note when I play it and having the tip joint relax so that you can play through the note with not a lot of tension. Similar to just basically the philosophy of guitar playing, for sure. Left hand is exactly the same. I try to keep my thumb about behind the second finger and have the fingers parallel with a fan shape so that the pinky touches on the outside edge and then the index finger touches on the opposite edge. So you have this sort of fan of fingers coming out. I find that's the main thing when I work with students right away that's very difficult. I've never seen that happen naturally. Everyone who picks up an instrument wants to grab on with a thumb over here and reach forward with the pinky at an angle, right? So if you have to do a stretch, you think all the work coming from the pinky. I like to think of the pinky being curved and then the index finger doing the work. It's much stronger. That can stretch.
That's a nice way. Yeah, it's a really nice way of putting it.
Yeah, so that's basically the basic idea of the setup. So it's very similar for anyone who's played classical guitar. It's a very seamless transition. But I think it's important to know the instrument and know the history and the amazing amount of potential that there is combining different techniques. So if I was going to play jazz, I would do more of a strumming with index and thumb. I'm using thumb down and index up, all flesh. So you get this warmth in the tone.
Yeah, man,
Then
George Benson. Yeah.
Total George Benson, yep. Benny Chong and I definitely want to have him as a guest artist on Ukulele Corner. He lives not far, so as soon as we can get people back together, I want all of your listeners to go check out Benny Chong online. He is like the Joe Pass or George Benson of the ukulele.
Oh, awesome.
And he uses an interesting left-hand technique often, which is the thumb over the back to get
like a cello, almost.
It's like a cello, yeah, or you see double bassists use that technique, and falling back in, and it's just rotating the hand forward, the elbow has to come out a bit. And he plays on baritone, so it has the same register as a guitar, but he is very adamant about the reentrant tuning. So there's what's called the reentrant tuning. That's the one that has the higher pitch on the fourth string. So then it re-enters the scale after you play that. So this G, if you think of My Dog Has Fleas, you have to think of that note being way up here. Oh, sorry. So now that sounds familiar. So that's how the reentrant tuning would sound. This pitch is down an octave. But certain strumming techniques and that idea of thumb and index, they're wonderful to learn. So it's something I like to teach as well, both sort of styles, this sort of classical finger style right hand position, but also the traditional ukulele style.
Yeah, very nice. Could you could I ask you to demonstrate a piece, just maybe something or a part of a piece?
Sure.
You've
always asked, you've wanted to hear Capricho Arabe, right? That's
oh my gosh, that would be
we're
amazing.
working on this book. I had so much fun, and I'm so grateful, Simon, for you giving me the chance and for all your great feedback. And it's been a fun collaboration working with you. And so we had this idea as we're developing the Ukulele Corner website that it'd be great to have a repertoire book that has graded repertoire, and we came up with 8 levels. And so towards the end, I was really able to dive into some of the great work for classical guitar. Leading up to it, we went through a lot of the Carcassi and Giuliani and source studies and a lot of Bach and other music. So here's one that is adapted from classical guitar, Capricho Arabe.
Wow, I feel there needs to be a round of applause after that. It's fantastic. I was really intrigued because I heard the audio track that goes along with the book, and so I was following along with the music just then. But
Oh, great. Okay.
it's so cool to see it actually executed. So tell me, well, I mean, for those listening, just to reiterate, this is coming out of the book that Jeff and I collaborated on called Graded Repertoire for Classical Ukulele, and it's over at ukulelecorner.com. And with the book, you can actually download all the audio. So it comes with whatever it is, like 50 plus pieces recorded, which is, by the way, everyone, if you didn't figure this out already, but Jeff is kind of a beast as a musician. So, uh, so he's
What was interesting? I was going to say, as far as that recording, I don't know. There's a little bit of construction going on next door, even though there's social distancing. I hope you couldn't hear table saws going off then. But right when I sat down, we finished the book. We're getting ready to publish it, and I needed to record it as close to 70 pieces. And the day that I said, and I have a home studio here, as soon as I start recording, like jackhammers are going on. Like, no. And I wanted to finish it. I had it like 3 days or so before the book was going to be ready. But I was able to get through it, and I did find I have these Neumann KM184 mics. I was amazed that I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to have to start recording. And it picked up just fine. It didn't pick up all that extra noise. You can hear the sound beautifully.
Yeah, that's great.
And yeah.
So tell us a couple of things that you have to do to adapt six-string classical guitar music, and this piece as well as drop D tuning on the guitar. So what kind of things do you have to do? I mean, you actually just published an article on classicalguitarcorner.com where you talk and give some examples of
right.
some things, but can you walk us through some of the challenges or compromises you have to do?
Absolutely. It's really fun. And I think it's very exciting looking for solutions to a limited range. That's the main issue, right? And no bass notes. And a big reason that I do use the low G instead of more of the reentrant tuning, a lot of wonderful classical music is possible. And everyone should look up the work of John King. He was a brilliant classical guitarist and ukulele player from Florida, and he taught at a university there. And using campanella fingerings, you can do this beautiful work with the outer strings only a whole step apart. And I definitely want to do, volume 2 of the book that will be all based on high G, the reentrant tuning. But with low G, a piece like this, I needed to use that because the range of where the melodies would fall would allow certain things like these bass lines, right? I need all that on this 4th string. And so a lot of it is actually, sometimes I just transpose things up a 4th. Other pieces I realize that even if you do that and try to be literal to guitar fingerings, it just won't fit. So then I try to find another key. And so part of the process is first determining what key best suits the piece. And then the fun comes from finding how you can be in one register and then a bass note's not there. Can you play it up an octave? Can you find another place or maybe another chord tone? There give and take that has to be there, but the goal is honor the music as best as possible so that the essence of what the composer originally had intended can come across. And so I've found that if there are times when maybe I should be playing a D in the bass because that's the root of a chord. If I play the 3rd or the 5th or something else instead, or if I play it up an octave, it might be fine. So you could think of those as sort of disadvantages of the instrument, right? The limitations. But then you start thinking about the possibilities. And you can reach forever on a ukulele compared to a guitar. You can get from a very low position to a high position. So this chord that I play for a really nice, now I'm in G minor. Originally the song's in D minor. This wouldn't be that easy to play on a guitar, but it's quite easy on ukulele. And it's 2/3, major thirds. And so finding new chord voicings and things that, if you know the guitar as, the piece on the guitar, it's really refreshing to try it in a different way. Certain parts, like when we get to the third theme, this, I had to change register a lot to get the, I can't stay right here, so I have to move up here. Then I go down an octave, as originally written. And then instead of down an octave, I go up an octave. So octave displacement is something that happens a lot. Finding, you can still play a phrase, but maybe it's not in the same register. But if it's played with a certain sort of understanding of the music, then it still comes across. It doesn't, there's sometimes I think, oh, am I getting too far away? Is this really working? Just the other day, I arranged Recuerdos de Alhambra, and this is maybe a bit of a stretch because you can't get the bass line exactly the same. There's this, that is a basic pattern, but I found doing this, I'm changing it a little bit, but then I can get, so then, it's still the essence of the pieces there. The melody is still there. Different bass notes. Totally different fingerings. Then I can sneak in the original right here. Just for that one measure. The bass line work there. So the idea is you can still try to be true to a melody. You don't want to change melodies, but maybe accompaniment can be varied in different ways, and definitely fingerings can. So getting this, as on the guitar, you'd be playing that around a 10th position, getting that, it's this A7 with a flat 9 in it. But then I found in 5th position, usually that what would be a D minor chord is now it's a D7 going to G. And I use my third finger to bar and release, which is the ukulele sort of technique. Or I actually use second finger. Sometimes you get not just your index finger, but you do bars with any fingers by collapsing tip joints. You can go in and out. That's a very common ukulele technique. So the point is that you can just experiment with where things fall on the instrument. Knowing the harmony, I find is helpful for me. I think, okay, I need a G minor chord, or I need these exact pitches. Knowing the fingerboards, so you can know how to take something, finding it in different places is helpful.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah, well, it's very effective, and it really works. It's sort of, and then that's the ultimate goal, is that the music carries, and like you said, the essence of it, the idea of it translates across. Now I'm keen because you just sent, I haven't even heard it, but you sent through a transcription of Julia Florida, and I have it here for classical guitar. I'll play up to bar, the first main section, the first major section.
Great. Yeah.
And then I'd love to hear what it sounds like. Hang on.
Nice.
Do I even have all
Yeah, well, Simon's going to get his guitar. I'll just say, I have, like all of us, we're all at home, so it's a good chance to try some new things, right, and stay inspired. So my project yesterday was writing out all of that Recuerdos. I wrote down the whole piece, and then Julia Florida, Barrios piece one of my favorite pieces. And I've always wanted to play it on ukulele. Both those two pieces I had tried and gave up on. I said, no, I'm just going to come back to these later. I wasn't in the right mindset. I wasn't finding the solutions. And sometimes it takes a little bit of thinking through before something comes together. So let's hear the translation.
All right, so I'll just play the first little sections.
Beautiful playing. Lovely. So now we'll hear everything up a fourth.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Man, it really sounds, there's something so, I mean, they each have their special characteristics, but your ukulele, I mean, it's you and the ukulele, but also the music, it really, it's different, but in a good way. I'm not
Yeah,
voicing it very well, but it really is very beautiful.
there's something to say about the depth and richness of the guitar with the low D. It's so captivating and just, full. And so there's just this sense of intimacy, and the ukulele is so sparse, so you just try to say a lot with less. But then having things like, the first few pitches, these notes, once again, a stretch that would be, but I can play the note up here, so I can sustain. And I didn't read everything. I'm sorry. I made some changes here and there that shouldn't have been done. But the trick with the ukulele is sustain, because if I play a pitch, barely there, it's gone. So you have to, like a mandolin, you always hear
Right.
repeating, right? So ukulele is similar. That's why you often hear. There's a whole, technique of strumming melodies on ukulele. It's a very old style of playing. Is you just strum like crazy. So trying to play a piece like this that's very lyrical and has a lot of space, having as much resonance of notes ringing together is very helpful. One thing that I found interesting, this note is usually slid up to, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can just play. So I don't have, if you were to usually slide, it would be what's from an F sharp to an A on the fourth string. But I need to do it here in order to get this bass note. And so I figured that something I never tried before, actually, if I put my finger behind the nut, and you can actually slide from an open string. I've never thought of that before. It just happened as I was just doing this yesterday, or right on the nut. You can do sort of hammer on into it, but then you hear the hammer on the first fret. But if you start, it's more seamless.
Absolutely.
If you actually, so I was frustrated. I couldn't get that slide instead of, when it starts. So see, that's more seamless. And
yep, totally.
Another part, the part that we're just going into, that I thought, just to show how things can be adapted. So there's this really lovely phrase that comes out after we do this section. There's a transition. We're going to be going to, on the guitar, I believe it's B minor. Now we're in E minor. Usually that's lower, but I'm out of space here. Right? You can imagine the next part coming up. So what I did is this. And it's usually a pull-off, which actually that would be nice. But I decided to get a little bit more sustain. That's the whole decision-making thing. Well, which way would you prefer? Doing the pull-off is nice, but maybe, particularly with this chord, I can have the notes ring together and get a tiny bit more sustain. So the notes are all there from the original. They're up an octave, and the fingerings are different.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thank you so much. I think that was a really interesting exploration into this other world, and I think it's such a cool thing to hear familiar repertoire played in a different setting, and it still works. And it's also a little bit liberating in terms of, I think sometimes as classical guitarists we get locked into, has to be this way, has to be these notes, don't make mistakes, that kind of mentality, you know.
Yeah,
And so this
yeah.
process of moving it to another instrument, you can't play it as written. So it opens up, it sort of gives you a whole pass to be a bit creative or problem solve, compromise. And I just like that musically. It's sort of, I think it relaxes some of the stresses that can sometimes be put upon classical music.
Yeah, and it just shows that music can evolve, and there's so much that's possible with any piece that you interpret. And so, thinking of a lot of the great repertoire on the guitar came from other instruments. If you
Right.
think of Leyenda or some of the great Spanish pieces by Albanese and Granados, and some of that repertoire, all of anything before the guitar was even in existence, so the lute music and the music of Bach and Scarlatti. That's such an important part of the repertoire. I think the ukulele has a huge potential. That's something that I find that's really exciting about this, exploring this repertoire. It's like, wow, there's so much possible, and there's a lot of great music that's been played in ukulele, but not a large amount of really in-depth research of classical repertoire. So it's fun.
Yeah, very nice. Well, thank you. Well, I think it might be time to take a couple of questions. Everyone's been very patient. We thought Jeff and I discussed beforehand that we would just keep the conversation running. But if you have any questions for Jeff, please do write them in the comments or wherever you are watching. I can tell you that lots of nice comments. Lots of you can go back on the YouTube video and have a look at lots of nice congratulations, and
Oh, cool.
sounds
Nice.
fantastic. Cheyenne said, Capricho Árabe on ukulele. My life is complete now.
Well, yeah, I hope that some of your students play it. You play it better than they can play it better than I can, and there's so much fun, music to explore. And any student of guitar, if you've gone through the Carcassi studies, we've included that in the book, and a lot of great repertoire. Like one I watched learning from you. Thinking of Carcassi, Etude number 16 from Opus 60, and a lot of guitar students go through Opus 60. It's usually played in the key of F in a low position, right? And I love your idea of moving it up higher, and so that's something I did for the book, and the tone is much sweeter. In the fifth position. So there are a lot of familiar repertoire, but in a new place. And sometimes I feel as a musician, you're learning the piece and you get so weighed down with it. It feels like, I'm so trapped by this piece. So it's nice to play. I like playing different instruments. I play a lot of classical guitar, a lot of steel string guitar, even archtop jazz guitar and ukulele, different types of ukuleles. I find just it clears your mind and it refreshes your sense of musicality in a way.
A couple of questions coming in. So Drew asked, can you comment on guitar? Oh, hi Drew, first of all. Drew's over in the Bay Area. And can you comment on guitar and ukulele duets, please?
Sure, yeah, they work beautifully. And so the ukulele works well with guitar playing melodies, playing single line melodies, and then it also works really well strum. That's the most typical way you think of the ukulele is strumming. And so I play a lot of Hawaiian music, and not much of it is written down like classical repertoire, but there's a lot of music, and it's a very big tradition. If I play in sort of a Hawaiian style, this would be perfect for a guitar to play along with. Now I'll just do accompaniment. Back to melody. So the idea is that it works well as an accompaniment instrument, strumming, or playing melodies. There's something we'll have to work on too, is more repertoire for, I'll write some down so that we can have some duets.
Yeah, I think that'd be really cool. Yeah, absolutely. Spiller asked, please discuss the impact that using different strings materials can make on the sound that is produced.
Yeah, definitely. So I like to use D'Addario strings, and I've found they make specific sets of strings for ukulele. And the low G can be wound, like mine is here. If you can see, it's a wound string instead of a clear string. It has a little bit more of a heavy sound. You can also get the tension allows it to be like a third string on a guitar, to be just, it has more tension. But it can be clear, and that I find just gives a little bit of a softer tone. And of course, you don't get any string noise with that. That's one thought. But I've used both the D'Addario classical guitar strings, Pro Arte, that brand. Yeah. I use them on ukulele and tenor. They work perfectly. So that's what I tend to use a lot of the time. Yeah, I like because they're thicker. They're a little bit more. You can get a little bit more tone out of the thicker strings. So I've experimented with that. Another thing that I'll mention too, if you're a guitar player switching over to ukulele, there's this amazing thing where you have a lot more string snap and tension, and it feels really great for your right hand. Sometimes if you're tuned really low, it takes a long time to sort of get through a string. It's not as responsive, but the tension of the ukulele is very responsive. You can really feel, it's something I just, playing both instruments is something I really like. I really like the higher string tension.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I do sometimes. I mean, Evita, my wife, has a little tiny, it's a soprano size, I assume the smaller one. And the strings on that are actually quite slack. So it's sort of, the pitch goes out a little bit, and you have to be quite gentle with the strings. I think you can't make sure there's no gripping happens. So, the feel and the tension, I imagine, can change quite a bit from instrument to instrument. So a few more things coming in. Rebecca said, I'm an adult beginner ukulele player with a husband who plays classical guitar. I'm sorry. Any tips on where to start? Yeah, I mean, there's got to be a lot of materials out there. I will say, again, that Jeff and I are collaborating on a website called Ukulele Corner. And we do have a fingerstyle. Jeff's recorded a fingerstyle course, which I think would be absolutely translated through to classical playing style. And if you like our approach, our way of teaching and communication, that would definitely be obviously a good place to start. But yeah, where would you start as a beginner ukulele player?
I would start by getting into the idea, like you mentioned, of fingerstyle playing and developing some of the right hand technique that then you can play a clear single line melody. Let's say, like developing a rest stroke would be important. A lot of ukulele players aren't taught that when they're first starting. But if you can play a rest stroke where your finger stops on the next string down, you'll be able to project your melodies beautifully with the guitar playing. So in our fingerstyle course, for example, if you learn some of the melodies there, we have melodies like Ode to Joy. Sorry. The guitar could do accompaniment, and you could start by playing melody. That is a really great place to start. The guitar is very typical, doing fingerstyle accompaniment. I'm playing what the accompaniment could possibly be to that piece. So a lot of, in the book, I wrote in the fingerstyle chorus, chord diagrams above the songs, and I did a lot of folk songs like Amazing Grace and Our Lee, some Hawaiian repertoire, probably about 10 or so Hawaiian songs. And all of them have chord symbols. So if her husband could read chord diagrams and be able to do accompaniment, then the ukulele could play the melody.
Yeah, very nice. Greg asked, where can we access the recordings for the classical ukulele book? At the moment, they're just sort of a download that comes along with the book. But we probably, at some point, it's such good repertoire, we might release an actual album of it,
Yeah.
on iTunes or something. But for now, it sort of comes with the book. So when you get the book, you can get those downloads.
And specifically, just so people know, because I get that email a lot, if anyone has bought the book and they're looking for the download, there are clear instructions in the book, but it's CGC Publishing, no, GuitarCornerAcademy.com,
Yep.
right? You go to that and then you click on downloads and then you put in your name and your email address.
Yep.
And then the songs are sent to you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's really beautiful. Ken asked, have you ever played a ukulele tune in fifths like a violin or a mandolin?
Great question. Yeah, so a big part, I should have explained a little bit more with slack key guitar. I mentioned how my father played a lot of Hawaiian music. Slack key means cordatura, where you change the tuning. And so I've experimented with a lot of different tunings. And I've never tried, like the mandolin tuning is tuned in fifths, or a violin. But what I have tried are different tunings that are specific to open chords. So for example, if I play G, C, E, A, if you think about that, G, C, and E are part of a C chord, and A is not. It'd be like a C6. They call it the C6 tuning. What if I took that A down to a G? Then we get a C chord. So this would be very typical of slack key sort of thinking, is to play tune to an open chord. So I haven't done fifths, but I'll play something maybe in a slack key style so you can understand sort of how that approach to tuning can change the sound of the instrument.
That's cool. What's that called?
I was just improvising. That's
great.
Typical sort of Hawaiian form. It's based on a song called Ku'uipo Onauna. And I live on a street called Onauna. And so if you come to Hawaii, it's important to know certain pronunciation. So O-N-A, you think it'd be pronounced Ona. And that can have a different meaning than Onauna. Onauna is something that's just pleasant and satisfying, enriching. Ona means to be completely drunk, just totally trashed. So anyway, Ku'ipo means a sweetheart. So my dear sweetheart is the name of it. It's a common Hawaiian sort of form, but there are about maybe 50 songs that use that progression and do variations. It's almost like a blues progression.
Yeah, very cool. Well, that was just great, Jeff. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Really, I mean, I'm still learning stuff about you. I mean, we met at Ben's class, but also a David Russell masterclass, and we've obviously been working together. But it's just been really, really fun. So thank you. And so people can, what's your website? Your website?
My website is jeffpetersonguitar.com. Oh, and also I wanted to mention, all of us are staying home right now, and so a lot of musicians and artists are trying to get their work out there in different ways. And if you go to my Facebook page, it's Jeff Peterson Guitar on Facebook. I did a live stream concert of ukulele the other day. I'm going to do a concert tomorrow at 4 p.m. Hawaii time. So I think it's 6 hours ahead on the East Coast. It'd be a little bit late. It'd be like 10 p.m. I think. Yeah, but I might do different times as well. But there's a website that's a great platform for performance. It's called stageit.com. And I'm going to do a performance for the first time on that website tomorrow. So 4 p.m. Hawaii time, which is 6 p.m. East Coast time. I think 3 hours ahead on the West Coast.
And you can head to Jeff Peterson Guitar on Facebook to find the links for that.
You can find, yeah, I put an announcement of it there. And then if you go to stageit, stageit.com, then just look up my name there for upcoming performances. It's actually a great site. They have all different types of music. Bon Jovi was on there recently, of all things. So,
that's awesome.
But they actually, yeah, you can actually purchase tickets, and it's like going to actual show.
Oh, I look forward to it. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Well, actually, I'll let you go, Jeff. So you can relax now. But thanks so much. And
yeah, it's so good to see everybody. Thank you so much. Great to see you, Simon. Thanks for spending time.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.
Bye. Well, that was an absolute pleasure. So thank you so much to Jeff Peterson. Thank you, everyone, for staying around. I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you for people who wrote in questions. Thank you to everyone just saying hello and where you're from. Of course, just to reiterate, Jeff and I are collaborating on ukulelecorner.com. So if you want to follow more along with this project, please go over there and you can get on the mailing list. There's actually a free download thing with some fingerstyle examples. I think one of them is classical, one's Hawaiian, one's a bit more jazz. And that'd be a nice way to stay in touch, because I'm not always going to be doing it through classicalguitarcorner.com, because it doesn't make, it's another project. But if you are interested in following along with that project, please head on over there to the email list. As you can see, Jeff is a phenomenal musician, lovely person. I'm very grateful to be working with him, and I'm excited to see where this project goes. So take care, everyone. Stay safe. The next live stream will be on Thursday at 4 p.m. So basically the same time as this started. So it's going to be 4 p.m. New York time, and that will be April 2nd. That's going to be our third scale workshop. So if you haven't looked at the other two, maybe you have a look at the other two. We're going to be working on that G major 2-octave scale again. And how about I see if I can leave you with a track from the book. The one that I started off with. Give me just a second. Here we go. Yeah, and I'll see you all soon. All right, here we go. This takeout music. Taking us out. Here we go.